we will discuss the various modes of and products of intracellular accumulation. Okay. So what are the common substances you know that tend to accumulate within the cell from your common sense? What are the substances that tends to accumulate within the cell? Fat or lipids, glycogen, protein, these are normal. Okay. So manifestation of metabolic derangement is intracellular accumulation. Accumulation may be transient and reversible or permanent. Effects ranges from harmless to toxic. So the accumulation that may be transient or reversible, that may wash out or wipe out after due course of time, or they may be permanent if not measures or medication taken properly at right time, then it may be permanent changes and give notorious effect to the cell and adjacent tissue. So the accumulations primarily of three types. First, accumulation of constituents of normal cell metabolism. So the accumulation, the byproducts of normal cellular metabolism has been deposited within the cell, namely fats, proteins and carbohydrates. Next broad category is accumulation of abnormal substances of abnormal cell metabolism. So this type cellular metabolism is not normal. There is underlying pathology or abnormal cellular metabolism. As a result, various products or various byproducts or material accumulates within the cell, namely glycogen or inborn error of metabolism in diseases like glycogen storage disease, or various genetic or hereditary deficiency of various enzymes. Hereditary deficiency of various enzymes. Okay. Next, the third one is accumulation of pigments, and the third category is accumulation of pigment. Okay, endogenous pigment, the pigments that are being metabolized from our cellular metabolism, and exogenous pigment, the pigments that we acquire from the environment or outside, outsource. So intracellular accumulation of 4 different materials like lipids, protein, glycogen and pigments. Of all these 4, the most common is lipids, okay, or fat. And whenever the lipids or fat accumulate in the tissue or cell, the term named as steatosis. Okay. Cholesterol, if the deposition is cholesterol or cholesterol esters, then the term may be called as cholesterolosis. So steatosis is the term, steatosis of liver, steatosis of spleen, steatosis of heart. Most common is steatosis of liver. So most common product of intracellular accumulation is lipid or cholesterol ester. Next is protein, then glycogen, and the least common is pigment. Okay. So what are the mechanisms of intracellular accumulation? The underlying mechanisms. Why the normal cellular metabolism deranged, and instead of washing out the byproduct of cellular metabolism, why they tend to accumulate within the cell? Okay, as we all know that cell is a unit of life, so each and every cell has a property to synthesize its nutrients or metabolize the nutrients and excrete the toxic products from the cell and survive to the fullest. So if any underlying pathology of the above mechanism occurs, then intracellular accumulation occurs, like increase the production of certain material. Okay, there is a chance of intracellular mechanism. Next, decreased excretion of the toxic product. Then there is a chance of intracellular accumulation. Next, defective transport of protein. Then there is also a chance of intracellular mechanism, intracellular accumulation. So, the broad mechanism of intracellular mechanism, mostly abnormal metabolism, alteration in protein folding and transport. Which cell organelle is responsible for protein folding and transport? Endoplasmic reticulum. Right? Rough endoplasmic reticulum. Deficiency of critical enzyme. So, enzymes are important for the cellular metabolism. So, if any deficiency of the cellular metabolism is deficient, then there is a chance of intracellular accumulation and inability to degrade phagocytous particles. So, cell eating is called phagocytosis, cell drinking is called pinocytosis, and phagocytosis and pinocytosis is collectively known as endocytosis. Okay? So, taking up something from outside the cell, the process is called endocytosis, and vomiting out or puking out some things from the cell to the exterior is called exocytosis. So, if there is any abnormality due to phagocytosis and phagolysosome formation, then also intracellular accumulation occurs. Okay? Now, I told you earlier, the most common is fatty change of steatosis, fatty metamorphosis, intracellular accumulation of neutral fat or triglyceride within the parenchymal cells. The most common, most vulnerable organ, solid organ, the metabolic factory of our body is liver, is more vulnerable to get deposited by fat. Okay? But fatty changes can also occur in heart, skeletal muscle and kidney, but most common is liver. So, among 10 individuals you encounter every day in your clinics or in your OPD, 2 to 3 of them are suffering from fatty liver. Okay? So, this is the same thing, maybe the mild variety, but fatty liver or steatosis of the liver parenchyma or lipid accumulation in the hepatocytes is most common among all viscera. Okay? Next, causes of fatty liver, culprit, chronic alcohol abuse, alcohol dependence. Diabetes mellitus, also important for metabolic derangement and fatty liver or steatosis of various organs. Obesity, morbid obesity, BMI more than 30, more than 33 are generally associated with fatty liver. Okay? So, protein malnutrition, starvation, suffering or death caused by lack of food, drugs, toxin, anoxia, pregnancy, all are important causative factor or etiological factor of fatty liver. But the most common and most notorious is chronic alcohol abuse or alcohol dependence. Okay, next is diabetes mellitus and obesity. Pregnancy also, cases of pregnancy are also associated with fatty liver due to overacting power of estrogen, because estrogen is a anabolic hormone. Okay. So now this is the picture. Fatty liver, how does the liver look like? It is enlarged in size, it has smooth surface, glistening surface and important distinction from other liver disease, smooth surface. So like other liver pathologies like cirrhosis of liver or viral hepatitis, the liver architecture, the gross liver architecture is coarse. But this type pathology or steatosis or fatty liver, the outer surface of the liver is smooth or smooth surfaced and glistening surface. Okay? Cut surface is shiny, greasy and yellow. So the normal contour of the liver is lost. It is more smooth and more glistening and more yellowish due to accumulation of fat. and other lipid accumulation in other body part, cholesterol and cholesterol esters. In atherosclerosis, hereditary hyperlipemia. What is atherosclerosis? You will be taught later in your DOP session. Atherosclerosis means athero means artery. Okay, so a damaged artery has three layers. One is intima, next is media. কি কথা বলছিস তোরা ওখানে? কি হয়েছে রে? কি কথা বলছিস? কি নাম তোর? কথা বলিস না, যাই নাম হোক। Media and next is serosa or adventitia, তাই তো? তাহলে if artery has been injured by any obnoxious stimuli like bleeding or like trauma from outside, okay, the intimal layer or the endothelial lining, if damaged, then there is a tendency of that intima to accumulate lipid and formation of a plaque. Okay, foamy histiocytes made a plaque within the intimal layer of the artery. So cholesterol accumulates in smooth muscle cell and macrophages in the intima of arteries. And what is hereditary hyperlipemia? Cholesterol accumulates in macrophages, usually under the skin, forming tumor-like structures known as xanthoma. So we'll discuss the things in pictorial diagrams, later slides. So atherosclerosis, xanthoma, cholesterolosis, these are the various titles of a same spectrum. Okay, different name, but the pathogenesis is more or less similar. If the cholesterol or neutral fat accumulates in liver, then it is called fatty liver or steatosis of liver. If it occurs within our blood vessel, then it is called atherosclerosis. If it is occur within the skin and subcutaneous tissue, then it is called xanthoma. If the cholesterol or fat deposition occur in the submucous of biliary organ like gallbladder, then it is called cholesterolosis. So pathogenesis is more or less same. Intake of fat by foamy histiocytes in blood or tissue and foamy histiocytes, lipid-laden macrophage, and formation of this kind of pathology. Then cholesterolosis, এটা হচ্ছে atherosclerosis, normal cut section of the artery, normal artery, tear in the arterial wall, endothelial injury, damage, and fatty material deposit in the vessel wall due to acceleration of various comorbidity like hypertension, like dyslipidemia, like smoking, like obesity, like sedentary lifestyle, okay, like trauma, and ultimately these fatty material or cholesterol ester are taken up by the foamy histiocytes, okay, or macrophages, and they tend to accumulate and form a tough plaque within the intimal layer. So in result, the lumen of the artery will be narrowed down. Okay, the lumen of the artery will be narrowed down. You can appreciate this from this picture, and this narrowed down lumen of artery will ultimately slows down the blood flow and predisposes various vascular events like cerebrovascular accident, like acute myocardial infarction, or etc. Okay, so this is atherosclerosis. Now xanthoma, I told you, deposition of cholesterol ester and cholesterol in skin and subcutaneous tissue and formation of this knob-like structure, mostly extension surface of upper arm and lower limb. Okay, this is the thumb. Okay, so knobby appearance, the patient may have the defect in lipid metabolism. So this is called xanthoma. You can appreciate the yellowish tinge of this tumor, okay, and the knobby appearance. This is the smooth, a rough appearance, multiple knobs. And if this is excised and then processed under histopathology tissue processing mechanism, and a slide is made from this tumor, and the slide will see like this, will show this picture under microscope, okay. This is the foamy macrophages, foamy histiocytes. ওকে, বুঝতে পারছিস? এই দেখ, এটা স্কিন এন্ড সাবকিউটেনিয়াস টিস্যু, আর এগুলো হচ্ছে লিপিড অ্যাকুমুলেশন, ফোমি হিস্টিওসাইটস। এটা সেল, হোয়াইটিশ ফোমি সাইটোপ্লাজম অ্যান্ড ব্লু ডট লাইক নিউক্লিয়াস। দেখা যাচ্ছে? আরে হ্যাঁ কি না বল, দেখা যাচ্ছে তো? তাহলে দিস ইজ কল্ড xanthoma. দিস ইজ gross or macroscopic picture we can see through naked eye, and this is microscopic picture. এটা কি কথা বলছিস? এই সামনে বসে বসে কথা কি বলছিস, আমাকে বোঝা, এখানে এসে বস, কথা বলিস না। This is histopathological picture of cholesterolosis, okay. So cholesterolosis, what is the organ that is affected by cholesterolosis? I told you earlier, gallbladder, okay. Biliary organ, gallbladder. So this is the ciliary columnar epithelium, and this is the foamy histiocytes in lamina propria and muscular layer, okay. এই দেখ foamy histiocytes বড় করে দেখতে পাচ্ছিস কেমন? এই যে সেলটা নিউক্লিয়াস আর সেলটা সাইটোপ্লাজম, দেখ কিরকম সাদা হয়ে আছে। এই যে নিউক্লিয়াস, সেলটা সাইটোপ্লাজম, নিউক্লিয়াস, সেলটা সাইটোপ্লাজম। This is the nucleus of the cell, this is the cytoplasm of the cell. So, the main fat are accumulated within the cytoplasm of the histiocytes. What are histiocytes? The tissue macrophages are called histiocytes. The blood histiocytes are called monocyte. Monocyte, histiocytes, macrophages all have similar function. But the monocytes that lives in our blood, histiocytes, they live in our tissue, okay, solid tissue. So their function is to take up any foreign substance and make an entry level defense mechanism, okay, against any odd or any abnormal material, against any abnormal material. So here the foamy histiocytes mean the histiocytes or the macrophages, they sense the lipid, the excess lipid as foreign body. So they take up the lipid in their cell cytoplasm and formation of a foamy histiocytes occur. বোঝা গেল? তাহলে এটা cholesterolosis. Next, lipid accumulation is over. Intracellular protein accumulation, where you can see two important diseases are multiple myeloma and cystic fibrosis. So how the intracellular protein accumulation occur? Same as lipid, either due to overproduction of the protein or due to decreased excretion of the protein from the cell, okay. Like the fat, like the glycogen, every intracellular accumulation, the basic of accumulation means either overproduction or either decreased excretion, okay. So overproduction of protein, where does it occur? Monoclonal gammopathy or multiple myeloma or B cell neoplasm, okay. So excessive amount of normal proteins, excessive amount of normal proteins means excessive amount of immunoglobulins. Immunoglobulins are normal for our body though. They are produced by which cell? B cell, the T cell. Humoral immunity, a cell mediated immunity, B cell, right? So B cell or plasma cell is responsible for the production of immunoglobulin, okay. So multiple myeloma is a disease where there is monoclonal proliferation of the B cell occurs. So there is unputdownable proliferation of the B cell occurs. So this is a B cell neoplasm, and as a result, from each and every B cell, there will be an overwhelming amount of immunoglobulin production, and in turn this immunoglobulin tends to accumulate within the cell. So multiple myeloma and the bodies or the intracellular accumulated bodies are called Russell bodies. Okay, ছবি দেখাবো পরে. And next is defective intracellular transport and secretion. Another important disease is cystic fibrosis, that is a chloride channel CFTR gene defect, chromosome 7 inborn error genetic disease. So there is a defect in intracellular transport and secretion, endoplasmic reticulum stress induced by the unfolded and misfolded protein, accumulation in endoplasmic reticulum, and aggregation of abnormal or misfolded proteins in tissue. So two important diseases of intracellular protein accumulation is multiple myeloma, the bodies are called Russell body, and cystic fibrosis. There is accumulation of mucin. Okay. Another important disease is amyloidosis. পরে সব কঠিন কঠিন ক্লাস হবে. amyloidosis long question আসে, big topic. Systemic amyloidosis, localized amyloidosis due to abnormal folding of protein AL, AA, এই ধরনের প্রোটিনস কিছু হয় যেগুলো অ্যাবনর্মাল প্রোটিন. ইমিউনোগ্লোবিউলিন ছিল নর্মাল প্রোটিন, কিন্তু অ্যামাইলয়েড হচ্ছে অ্যাবনর্মাল প্রোটিন. ওকে, সো ইন্ট্রাসেলুলার অ্যাকুমুলেশন, স্টার্টিং ফ্রম আওয়ার ফার্স্ট স্লাইড, হোয়াট উই taught that whether the accumulation is results from the normal constituents of abnormal cell metabolism or abnormal constituents of normal cell metabolism. So amyloidosis is entirely abnormal. Okay, but immunoglobulin and Russell bodies are not normal, but their production, their proportion, their magnitude of the protein production is not normal. But here the production, whether it is very minor amount, the production and itself the protein existence is abnormal. That is called amyloidosis. Round eosinophilic droplets are vacuole in aggregates in cytoplasm, may be amorphous or crystalline. Example is amyloidosis. Okay, দেখ টাঙে হয়েছে এটা, আর এটা external nares and orbicularis oculi muscle এর এখানে হয়েছে protein accumulation. Okay, amyloidosis. এই দেখ excessive normal proteins, Russell body. এই দেখ like B cell or plasma cell. Okay, eccentric nucleus, moderate amount of cytoplasm, normal plasma cell. So what is the normal plasma cell picture? Like একটা ডিম্বাকার cell or elliptical cell with the eccentric nucleus. Okay, and moderate amount of cytoplasm, and this cytoplasm is the source of production of immunoglobulin. And if immunoglobulin production is overwhelming due to an underlying neoplasm or multiple myeloma, then this accumulation of immunoglobulin occurs, and this is called Russell body. Okay, দেখতে পাচ্ছি সবাই? দেখতে পারলি রাসেল বডি? এবার দেখ সিস্টিক ফাইব্রোসিস, thick tenacious mucin. Okay, clogged mucin is tracheobronchial tree. Okay, lungs, trachea, chief bronchus, আর এখানে bronchus, মিউকাস গুলো আটকে আছে. Defective of intracellular transport and secretion, cystic fibrosis. So very much dreadful condition, cystic fibrosis. Okay, intracellular accumulation of protein and secretion and transport is deranged or abnormal. So accumulation of mucus that need to be washed out or that need to be excreted through our secretion of tracheobronchial tree. But in these cases, the unfortunate kids, they cannot cough or they have very poor mucociliary clearance. So the normal consistency of mucociliary clearance or mucociliary secretion is drastically high or thick or viscid, okay, and ultimately the patient will die from respiratory failure. Very unfortunate. Next, intracellular accumulation of glycogen in glycogen storage disease and in also diabetes mellitus, because diabetes mellitus type 2 and or type 1 is a metabolic abnormality. There is abnormal glucose metabolism, okay. So abnormal metabolism of glucose and glycogen result in excessive intracellular accumulation of glycogen, uncontrolled diabetes mellitus, and also glycogen storage disease. Glycogen storage disease will be taught later, extensive list. Now next, intracellular accumulation of pigments. The pigments may be endogenous or exogenous. Endogenous pigment এর নাম বল একটা বডিতে, ক্যালসিয়াম, ক্যালসিয়াম মেলানিন, ক্যালসিয়াম তো আয়ন একটা, ক্যালসিয়াম পিগমেন্ট না, ক্যালসিয়াম জমলে পিগমেন্ট হতে পারে, ক্যালসিনোসিস, দ্যাট ইজ ডিফারেন্ট। কিন্তু ইন্ডিজেনাস মোস্ট কমন পিগমেন্ট ইজ মেলানিন। এই যে আমার তোর গায়ের রং, ঠিক আছে। মেলানিন কি থেকে হয় বল? টাইরোসিন, সব জানে ওরা। Pigments are colored substances, some of which are normal constituents of cell, that is melanin, whereas others are abnormal and accumulate in the cell only under special circumstances. So pigments can be exogenous. Virat Kohli, many tattoos in his body. So these are exogenous pigment. But endogenous pigments synthesized within the body itself due to byproduct of cellular metabolism. So there is a list which are endogenous pigment and exogenous pigment. Endogenous pigment, melanin, melanin-like pigment like alkaptonuria and Dubin-Johnson syndrome. It is liver, hereditary disease, okay. Hemoprotein-derived pigments, hemosiderin, hemozoin, bilirubin, porphyrin, lipofuscin. So this is a list of endogenous pigment, but most common is melanin, okay. The chief pigment, endogenous pigment of our body is melanin. Due to oxidation, it forms due to oxidation of tyrosine. And exogenous pigments is inhaled pigment and injected pigments. Inhaled pigment from coal dust, anthracosis, দেখাবো ছবি পরে। So exogenous pigments are the pigments introduced into a body from outside, such as inhalation, ingestion or inoculation. Exogenous pigment কি কি হতে পারে? যে কার্বন, অ্যানথ্রাকোসিস, কোল ডাস্ট, নিউমোকনিওসিস, ওকে। The workers that they work in coal industry, in the belt of coal belt, Asansol, Raniganj, Durgapur, okay, many patients come to this college or some other college as symptoms of progressive respiratory distress, chest pain, cough with black productive sputum. So those are the cases of pneumoconiosis and anthracosis, okay. So lung pick up by alveolar macrophages and regional lymph node and blackening of the tissue of the lungs, that is called anthracosis. এই ছবিটা দেখ কিরকম, এটা গ্রস পিকচার, ওকে, and এটা মাইক্রোস্কোপিক পিকচার. This is picture in naked eye and this is picture under the microscope. এই যে black streaks under alveolus, দেখতে পাচ্ছিস? anthracosis কেমন হয়েছে দেখ, anthracotic pigment, বুঝতে পেরেছিস? the black streaks seen between the lobules of lung, বুঝেছিস? এই যে intraalveolar space এ কিরকম গুলো পিগমেন্ট জমে গেছে। একদিন দুদিন কাজ করলে এটা হবে না, এক বছর দু বছরও না, 10 বছর 15 বছর 20 বছর কাজ যদি করে কেউ ইন্ডাস্ট্রিতে, কোল ইন্ডাস্ট্রি বা নিউমোকনিওসিস ইন্ডাস্ট্রিতে কাজ করে, অ্যাসবেস্টস ইন্ডাস্ট্রিতে কাজ করে, তখন তারা এগুলো ডেভেলপ করবে। আর আন্ডার দ্য মাইক্রোস্কোপ কেমন দেখতে লাগে, এই দেখ ব্ল্যাক পিগমেন্ট দেখতে পাচ্ছিস, অ্যানথ্রাকোটিক পিগমেন্ট দেখতে পাচ্ছিস, দেখ এটা সেলের নিউক্লিয়াস কিন্তু, this is not the pigment, this is pigment, this is pigment, this is pigment, this is pigment. So pigments or fats or proteins, whatever there will be the accumulation, their reside place is cytoplasm. So cell cytoplasm is harboring this exogenous pigment, okay, and this alveolar macrophage in hilar lymph node, they shows this anthracotic pigment. দেখা গেল? চোখে দেখছিস তো, মুখে হ্যাঁ বলতে কি আছে? এটা ইনজেক্টেড পিগমেন্ট, ট্যাটুইং, এক্সোজেনাস পিগমেন্ট, সেম থিং। Okay, the tissue macrophages, they take up the exogenous pigment and known as permanent tattoo. India ink, cinnabar, carbon are introduced into dermis, okay, by minute injection, and the dermis, the antigen presenting cell or the foamy histiocytes or Langerhans cell, whatever may be their name, but the macrophages in our body sense this exogenous pigment as foreign body. So they take up the pigment in their cytoplasm, and the pigment stay in the cytoplasm of the macrophages for prolonged period. So how the permanent tattoo will occur. Now next is lipofuscin, very important, wear and tear pigment. Okay, wear and tear pigment, fine yellow brown pigment granules composed of lipid containing residues of liposomal digestion, and it is found in primarily liver, kidney, heart muscle, retina, adrenals, nerve cell and ganglion cells. Okay, but most common is liver. So liposomal digestion or liposomal degradation byproduct, fine yellow brown pigment, this is called lipofuscin, and its other name is wear and tear pigment. So cardiac myocyte, cardiac muscle lipofuscin, like cell cytoplasm, yellowish brown pigment, দেখতে পাচ্ছি সবাই? এটা লিভার দেখ, হেপাটোসাইটস, এ দেখ গ্রিনিশ এই yellowish brown pigment, lipofuscin in hepatocytes. ওকে, সেলুলার সেনেসেন্স মানে একটা সেল যখন বুড়ো হতে থাকে, ওকে, তখন এরকম পিগমেন্ট তৈরি হয়ে যায়। ওই জন্য পিগমেন্টের আরেকটা নাম হচ্ছে ওয়ার অ্যান্ড টিয়ার। কাজ করতে করতে ওখানে ধসে যাচ্ছে আস্তে আস্তে, ও এবার আস্তে আস্তে ডেথের দিকে যাচ্ছে। সো লাইপোফুসচিন ইন হেপাটোসাইট, it is this cardiac myocyte, binucleated cell, the hepatocyte. This is the nucleus of the cell, and the pigment lies in the cytoplasm. Okay, this is the nucleus of the hepatocyte, but the nucleus of the hepatocyte, the pigment stays over in cytoplasm. So melanin, endogenous pigment, natural pigments, oxidation of amino acid tyrosine is followed by polymerization, and melanin produced by the cell called as melanocytes. Okay, so melanin production, if it is increased in some individual, then there is hyperpigmentation, and if the melanin production is decreased, then it is called hypopigmentation. Hyperpigmentation may be generalized and localized. Hypopigmentation may be generalized or localized. Okay, so two more pictures, disorders of melanin pigmentation, hyperpigmentation and hypopigmentation. Hyperpigmentation generalized is metabolic disease, Addison's disease, colasma. Okay, the hyperpigmentation হয়েছে there, generalized disease. আর localized কি হয়েছে? Pew-Jeger syndrome, melanosis coli, generalized Addison's disease. Okay, the hyperpigmentation দেখতে পাচ্ছিস due to overproduction of melanin. বুঝতে পারছিস? এবার hyperpigmentation দেখ, albinism and vitiligo. Albinism is generalized or genetic, and localized immunogenic mode of inheritance or immunogenic etiopathogenesis, that is called vitiligo. Hemosiderin, another important thing. Okay, hemosiderin is a hemoglobin derived golden yellow to brown granular crystalline pigment. Okay, and hemosiderin is an iron storage complex. It is only found in cells and denatured ferritin and other material. So the iron within the deposits of hemosiderin is very poorly available to supply iron when needed. So body needs iron. Iron is the main constituents of which thing? Hemoglobin. Okay, so iron is transported in our body by a transport molecule that is called ferritin. Okay, so whenever iron is free it is not utilized. But whenever the iron is coupled with ferritin, then it is readily available for absorption. But beyond the availability and absorption of iron, if the iron load to the body is excess, then there is a accumulation of iron pigments in our body. That overproduced or excessed unutilized iron pigment known as hemosiderin, and this hemosiderin is not for absorption or cellular metabolism. This is just a byproduct or waste product, but it has only the deleterious effect. Okay, hemosiderin কাদের হয়? Iron overload কার হতে পারে? The patients who have repeated blood transfusion. Okay, একটা পেশেন্ট থ্যালাসেমিয়া আছে, মেজর থ্যালাসেমিয়া মেজর আছে একটা পেশেন্টের, a patient who have thalassemia major or any hemoglobinopathy, he or she need innumerous number of blood transfusion in his or lifetime. Okay, so this prolonged history of multiple number of blood transfusion leads to a state where there is over deposition of the iron in our body. Principal position or principal organ of deposition is liver. Okay, and the condition is called as hemochromatosis, iron overload. ওই জন্য থ্যালাসেমিয়া পেশেন্টকে চিলেটিং এজেন্ট দেয়। ঠিক আছে, চিলেটিং এজেন্ট মানে যে এক্সেস আয়রন সেটা যাতে চিলেট করে সল্ট বানিয়ে বডির সাথে বডি থেকে এক্সক্রিট করে বার করে দেয়। তাহলে হিমোসিডেরিন যদি এক্সেস অ্যামাউন্টে জমতে থাকে সেই প্রসিডিওর তাকে বলে হিমোক্রোমাটোসিস। তাহলে বোঝা গেল হোয়াট ইজ হিমোসিডেরিন, why there is iron overload, and what are the abnormal constituents and what are their deleterious effects. So this is called hemochromatosis. Iron pigment appears as coarse golden granular pigment lying within the cell cytoplasm. এটা কি টিস্যু? এতক্ষণ দেখালাম এতগুলো সেল, এটা কি টিস্যু বল? এগুলো কি সেল? Hepatocytes, liver. So this is a picture, this is a biopsy picture taken from the liver of thalassemia major patient after his demise. Okay, so this is the iron pigment in cell cytoplasm. Okay, so this is called hemochromatosis. The condition is known as hemochromatosis, and the slide is shown under the microscope like this. Hepatocytes, the nucleus, but the coarse golden granular pigment are deposited within the cytoplasm. This is the nucleus of hepatocytes. This is the nucleus of hepatocytes. This is the cytoplasm that are heavily burdened with iron pigment. Okay, so this condition is known as hemochromatosis, and the pigment name is hemosiderin.